Well, hello and welcome to the Babylonian podcast. I am Michael and I'm thrilled that you are here. In this season of the Babylonian podcast, we're exploring all of the New Testament Apocrypha. Well, maybe not in all. Either way, you can find our notes on all the New Testament Apocrypha, what we talk about here on the podcast episode, and even more, either with the link in the show notes below or by going to our website, thebabylonian.com. With that, let's actually look at them, shall we? With scholars, sages, and the scriptures, let's Bible on. Welcome to Babylonia, the final apocryphal gospel episode. Not the New Testament. We're carrying on with that, still onward and upward, but nevertheless, the final apocryphal gospel episode, and then we will move into an entire genre. Right now, we're in the subgenre of Pontius Pilate texts. This is referred to as the Pilate Cycle, just because all these texts have to do with Pontius Pilate in one way or another. The previous text, not so much. The first text, quite a bit more, and then here we're going to follow along with that. Today, we are going to be going over a text called The Narrative of Joseph of Arimathea. Peter, do you want to just explain who Joseph of Arimathea is?
Joseph of Arimathea is the person who got Jesus buried after he died, and he paid money to have him buried.
Yeah.
And he's mentioned in, I think, in Matthew, maybe Mark. Is he in all of them?
Thought so. I don't know.
No, that makes sense.
But yeah, so that's all that we know about him. But that means that he must have been his disciple, to have been following him enough to, desire to honor his body after his crucified. Yeah, rich.
He was probably rich.
Yes. Yeah, true.
His name was Joseph.
Yeah. His name was Joseph. That is a confirmed fact. Yes. Yeah. So this story actually focuses a little bit on the two thieves on the cross. So in the Gospel of Luke specifically, and only does it mention the name, the conversation that happens, specifically the conversation that happens with the two thieves on the cross. One of them pretty much says, "Hey, Jesus, if you're really the Son of God, bring us all down from here." Kind of this arrogant attitude. Whereas the other humble thief on the cross says, "This dude didn't deserve it. So actually, if anything, Jesus remembered me in paradise. And when you enter into your kingdom," and Jesus says, "Truly, I tell you, today you will see me in paradise." And so who was this thief on the cross? Who was this Joseph of Arimathea? Find out today.
But we've already found out in a different apocryphal text. We do. We have gotten that before.
Updated it, yes. So you're referring to the Gospel of Nicodemus, where we do see Joseph of Arimathea. So, by the way, you have to listen to that one because that's just the best. But Joseph of Arimathea is locked up for being not even just a silent follower of Jesus, and we don't know to what extent he was loud. But in this one, this man's sticking up for Jesus in front of the crowds, and he gets locked up, and he comes out. But to get that whole story, you have to listen to the 2 episodes on the Gospel of Nicodemus, the Acts of Pilate, and on the Christ descending into Hades. Between the 12th, sometime in the 12th century, there was an apocryphal text named The Narrative of Joseph of Arimathea that was written in Greek, and that is what we're going to go over today. So it begins with 2 robbers. The names are Gestus and Damas. Gestus would find, this is just the backstory, the evil villain origin story. Well, I guess it's not a villain origin story because it doesn't explain how they became like this. But just to let you know who these 2 thieves are, one of them would find people traveling, strip them, murder them, hang women by their heels and cut their breasts off, drink the blood of babies, and do violent things.
I think he's a bad guy.
He's a pretty terrible dude. This author has also either had some pretty crazy intrusive thoughts or just I don't know. Yeah, probably not very helpful to meditate on those things. Nonetheless, Damas, or maybe it's Damas, we're going to go with Damas, was a Galilean who stole from rich people, but he did good to the poor and even buried them, which, if you're familiar with the apocryphal Old Testament, this might make you think of Tobit, who buries disgraced dead bodies. He robbed the Jews, and it's important that he robbed from the Jews because this is written in the later medieval ages when the church was pretty anti-Semitic, and even stole their Torah from the temple and stripped Sarah, the daughter of Caiaphas. So he does some bad things, but he's a little bit of a Robin Hood here.
Just to clarify, by stripped, you mean he took away the money from Sarah, the daughter of Caiaphas?
That's a good question. Actually, let me double check because let me double check. No, he stripped her naked.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow.
But something that might make this a little bit more justifiable in the eyes of this author is understanding that Caiaphas was the person who kind of said, hey, y'all, we should put Jesus to death because it's better that one person dies than that the whole nation dies. And so, it could be seen as justifiable.
Caiaphas is a bad guy, therefore his daughter must be evil, therefore it's okay for us to do horrible things. Silly justification,
exactly.
but makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So even this penitent thief actually we don't know. Well, let's say this, okay? So we have these two robbers. Okay. There's no way that we could know which one's going to be which. Okay, carrying onwards. Caiaphas and the Jews don't know how to celebrate the Passover without the stolen Torah. How are we going to do it? So they try to find out who stole it. Judas Iscariot is Caiaphas's nephew, and so they tell him that he should pretend to be Jesus' disciple so he can betray him. But Judas should make sure to never confess Jesus or follow his teachings.
Wow, they've got a whole setup here.
That way Judas can't lie.
Right.
Obviously. And obviously the point is not that Judas wasn't ever trying to be a follower of Jesus and never did anything good. It's that, good guys are good, bad guys are bad. So, but I guess he's kind of good here because he's honest in that, at least, I don't know, to some extent.
Judas Iscariot is not a liar in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In so much as, at least he's consistent with not following. I don't know what it means to be a disciple if you're not following their teachings, but.
Wow, these morally ambiguous characters.
Yeah. I mean, wow, these just very deep, profound, very complex and dynamic characterizations. So anyways, Judas tells the Jews that they should have a council to say that Jesus stole the Torah. Nicodemus says no, because Nicodemus is also a good guy all the time and is a brave and courageous person. Okay, if you can't read the sarcasm, refer back to the Gospel of Nicodemus and some of the conversation we have there. Sarah says that Jesus said, I can destroy the temple, okay, which is from the canonical Gospels. And this is the daughter of Caiaphas, which means she's a woman, okay, and she's also the daughter of the person who hates Jesus in this social setting of whoever's authoring this. Not necessarily going to be their favorite person. The people think she's a prophetess, okay? So in the Gospel of John, it said that Caiaphas prophesies when he says that one man should die for the people of Israel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a prophet in a good sense of oh man, God, the Father told me that this is going to work out for the salvation of everyone. Anyways, so they take Jesus and they ask him why he takes from the law and why he said he would destroy the temple. And Jesus doesn't respond to either of their questions. So then the people decide that they want to burn Sarah because Passover is coming up and they haven't found out who stole the Torah. But she says they should destroy Jesus and then they'll find the Torah. Annas and Caiaphas secretly give money to Judas to give him Annas and Caiaphas secretly give money to Judas to have him say Jesus stole the Torah. Judas goes to the sanctuary to ask what they'll give him if he gives him the one who destroyed the Torah and the prophets. And they say 30 pieces of gold. He sees Jesus walking on the street at night, gets the Jews to get soldiers and gets them to take Jesus. So you don't even have the disciples with Jesus. You don't have Jesus praying, Father, not my will, but your will be done. If it's your will, let this cup pass from me. Now they just see him walking, snatch him. Okay. So then they hand Jesus over to Pilate and he's crucified with Gestus on his left and Damas on his right. Remember, Gestus is the dude, the really terrible dude. And Damas is your first century Jewish robber Robin Hood. So Gestus gnashes his teeth against Jesus and continues to blaspheme him, saying that he would have killed him if he knew he were king, which is, evil and in line with that, but definitely not in line with the self-serving Gestus in the canonical Gospels who just wants to get off the cross. He's then taken alive. He is then taken alive by the devil. Damas then goes on, because Gestus has already been taken by the devil. Damas then goes on repenting of his sins and confessing Jesus and asking that he would be saved. And Jesus tells him that he'll be with him in paradise and gives him specific instructions to go to the cherubim and flaming sword that guard paradise and to tell them that Jesus said to let him in. Recall Jesus in Hades in the Gospel of Nicodemus. So then Jesus dies and the sanctuary and the temple pinnacle just collapse. Okay, so this is what Jesus says to this robber. He says, "Truly I say to you, Damas, that today you will be with me in paradise. And the sons of the kingdom, the children of Abraham and Isaac, Jacob and Moses, shall be cast into outer darkness." Which is a reference to the Jews, which is very interesting that not only does he refer to them being thrown into hell, but he refers to them ironically as ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, which he directly says that they are not actual sons of Abraham in the Gospel of John because they don't act like Abraham does. So that's interesting. So then he says, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and you alone shall dwell in paradise until my second coming, when I am to judge those who do not confess my name. And he said to the robber, "Go and speak to the cherubim and the powers who wield the flaming sword." There's a flaming sword that flashes back and forth and guards the way to paradise in Genesis chapter 3. "Say to them who have guarded paradise from the time that Adam, the first creation, was in paradise and sinned and did not keep my commandments, and I cast him out from there. Say that none of the first shall see paradise until I come the second time to judge the living and the dead. It having been written that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came down from the heights of heaven and came forth from the bosom of the invisible Father without having been separated from him, and came down into the world to be made flesh and to be nailed to a cross in order that I might save Adam, whom I fashioned. Say to my archangelic powers, the gatekeepers of paradise, to the officers of my Father, I require and order that he who has been crucified along with me should enter and receive remission of sins through me, and that, having put on an incorruptible body, he should go into paradise and dwell where nobody has been able to dwell." And then Jesus gives up his ghost and dies.
Wow. He says a lot more there than he typically does in the canonical gospel accounts. Because in the canon, you don't hear him saying a lot.
Yeah, man. I mean, you almost wonder if Luke left out these details so that other people couldn't hijack their way into paradise. We now have the password for paradise. Yeah.
Do want to point out, it is just kind of interesting that when you read through a lot of the gospel accounts, if I say Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they're not explaining, okay, well, here's the list of things okay, so Jesus died. Here's the significance. He's dying. He's holding on to their sins. And now he's taking the punishment. Or, if you believe it's participatory, you're identifying with him. You're being crucified right at that moment or whatever, right? They're not explaining any of that thing, those kinds of things when it's happening. So this one's really interesting because in this account, they take it to the next level and Jesus gives you, your theology, right? He's just what are all the things that I need to go ahead and let people know? And then let's throw in a few things that are a little bit outside of healthy Christian belief here. All the Jews are going to hell. That's one of the things that he says here, just yeah.
Yeah. He's and on a cross, you're suffocating unless you lift yourself up. So he's lifting himself up and he's let me get out some important instructions before everything happens. So now he has to go off and explain everything.
I didn't even think about
that.
Just
dude, by the way, yeah, I don't know why that came to mind, but it's also what he says in the canonical gospel is, "Today you will see me in paradise." So it's it seems at least he could have told him, "Hey, wait for me outside the gates of paradise. I'll come by and I'll tell my employees to let you in." Yeah, very interesting.
There will be someone who will have instructions. They'll give you they'll airdrop you the little details on how to, what you got to do. So
yeah,
Gabriel,
right.
Gabriel.
Yeah,
explain everything.
Yeah. It's, really all apocryphal literature just highlights how much the Bible just assumes that you already know. Joseph of Arimathea, yeah, he goes to my brother church, or I don't know.
Mm,
Anyways, it seems that because they're just name dropping this person, there's been no explanation of who they is, that perhaps this is somebody at least somewhat known in some of the
yeah,
churches. Yeah. Anyways, so it just highlights how the spare economy of biblical literature. So
yeah. But someone in you said this is 11th century or 12th century? 12th century?
12th century, yeah.
12th century. So how someone in the 12th century, they don't have that context. They never, like, they're not in the first century. They probably don't know who Joseph of Arimathea is. And so they're like, oh, let me go ahead and write out this explanation, right? Because I haven't talked to anyone. They don't have any context.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they're trying to explain. And isn't this the time when Thomas Aquinas is around? Or is it like the century after?
Thomas Aquinas he was born in, I think it's 1225 to 1274, I think is the years that Thomas Aquinas was alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is written in Greek as well, so it might not be have that scholastic influence. But I know that Thomas Aquinas is obviously known for scholastic, explaining every possible detail of every centimeter of Christian doctrine and its depths. And here you do see that desire to be I need to know how it was that Jesus got this filthy thief, well, not that filthy of a thief, actually, a pretty good thief, to be honest, into heaven, anyways. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Thomas Aquinas is
So,
famous for the Summa Theologica. So if someone mentions a Summa Theologica, they're talking about Thomas Aquinas' work. And I think Summa, I don't know Latin, but I'm guessing it's Latin. Exhaustive, right? The exhaustive theology.
yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. Good explanation. Yeah. So that's good. So carrying on with the story, Jesus just having given, some pretty important instructions, according to this author. Then we shift over. Joseph of Arimathea is taken by the Jews on the Sabbath that Jesus is arrested, and he's brought into a house. The four corners of the house come up, and he sees Jesus sit down and declare to the angels and cherubim to let in the thief on the cross. The thief on the cross and his cross are shining, okay? Remember the Gospel of Nicodemus, the Gospel of Peter. Jesus's cross goes with him into Hades, and depending on the tradition, whether it's the Gospel of Nicodemus, Christ descended into hell, or the Gospel of Peter, it's the cross preaching to the souls, and then comes up with him. And Joseph of Arimathea also had to figure out how to disassemble the cross to bring it through into his tomb and then reassemble it. So anyways, the four corners of this house come up. He sees Jesus sit down and declare to the angels and cherubim to let in the thief on the cross. The thief on the cross and his cross are shining. He then recounts how Hades and the angels cried, "Holy, holy, holy is he that was in the highest in the beginning," as Jesus ascended out of Hades with Adam and the patriarchs. Okay, again, this is obviously based on, or at least sharing a tradition with Christ's ascended into Hades. Jesus changes into flight, and the angels minister to him as he stays with them for 3 days. These would be the 3 days of Good Friday, Silent Saturday. Is it called Silent Saturday? Holy Saturday, I think it's called, and Easter. Later, the thief on the cross isn't there. So, John is wondering, where is the thief? So I guess the thief is taken bodily, which I guess, whoa. So I guess he's on a similar level with Jesus with this body. Well, okay, I guess Elijah, more like Elijah and Enoch. So later, the thief on the cross isn't there, but John begs Jesus to say who was with him. So this is after the ascension. Jesus says, John doesn't have understanding and can't know who it was, but that the thief on the cross became an heir of paradise, and that it is his alone until Jesus comes again. John asks to be worthy to see him. The thief appears, and John falls to the earth. John disappears and doesn't see Jesus anymore. And then Joseph of Arimathea, who's writing this, finishes the writing saying that he writes it so that the others would believe in Jesus and his signs and no longer serve the Torah.
Wow. They made this guy, okay, this person put this person up on, there's sometimes you put that person up on a pedestal or something unhealthy. They have taken a person in history and they've turned them into this fictional character and made them they kind of low-key kind of blasphemed a little bit, right? Would you call that blasphemy or idolatry, something like that? We're worshiping
idolatry maybe
this guy and they put him up to own.
Yeah. It's such an odd they put him on on the pedestal of paradise. The thief on the cross on the pedestal of paradise. They lifted him off the cross to the pedestal of paradise to own paradise until like Jesus comes again. And not even John, the beloved disciple, can see him. And he like literally just falls on his face before him. And it's interesting because there seems to be some inspiration of John and like, this is written so that you might believe and not serve the Torah, which is like, yikes. But or like obey the Torah, like, you know, listen to the Torah as authoritative. Yeah, like there's definitely this idolatry. But the weird thing is that it's just like this, it's not even like this good person, you know, like I think one of the points of the thief on the cross is that he, you know, he did mess up, but like bro's humble about it,
Mhm.
you know, and here he's this Robin Hood. He did some things, but it's so interesting that that's the character that we have like barely a story from in the Gospel of Luke. And he's like all exalted. Like there could have been so many, like even Joseph of Arimathea, you know?
Well, there also allows for more room for artistic liberty if there's not much on him. So I guess in their defense, right? Like we don't have much, so we've got to make a story, and so I guess it kind of tracks. But yeah, I mean, but like not to zoom past it, like the point. I don't want to say the point, but a significant point of like the story of the thief on the cross is like that there's redemption for the worst of us. But once you start saying that he was really a good guy all along, that's problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so my whole point was that like not only is he like a minor character, but he's not like you wouldn't even think that this would be the character. Because I
Mm.
mean that is one of the things is like that, you know, biblical fan fiction and pseudepigrapha would be based off of these characters like the Book of Enoch, where we get like I don't know how many sentences in Hebrew. It's like 1 to 3 sentences in English of like, you know, he walked with God. He was no more because God took him. What does that mean? But at least he was like a righteous character. We knew that he walked with God. There was something special about this seventh generation of humans from Adam's line. That's also, you know, going to lead up to Noah. But yeah, like you said, like one of the points is that this guy gets redeemed. And there's also this like really like anti-Jewish, even anti-Torah. I mean, I guess there could be different interpretations of Torah, but still, even like Paul quotes the Torah. You know, it says that we would no longer serve the Torah, but Paul quotes the Torah to make. He even quotes, and you know, Thomas Aquinas. You may have heard this distinction. This is actually from Thomas Aquinas of a moral law, a civil law, and a ritual law. That's a scholastic distinction. You know, like a Jew wouldn't be like, oh, you know, that's a moral law. That is going to be for forever. That's a ritual law. That's only as long as we have you know, they believe they're just going to have a temple perpetually. Or like, you know, like, oh, that's just a civil law. That just, you know, even though, you know, I think there is something to be said of that. But like, even that, you know, Paul quotes, you know, like think of like uh you don't muzzle an ox while it's treading grain, you know, and there are still wisdom principles from that need to be applied. So I don't know if
Yeah.
there's anything else you wanted to say, and then kind of like I don't know if you wanted to transition into kind of
Can we
like
just
the
elaborate?
orthodoxy index.
When you were talking
Yeah,
about the three different kinds of laws, so in context, you're saying like the Old Testament laws, they would categorize them in certain ways. So when it says, "Oh, here's what you need to go ahead and do with this oxen," oh, that's not a moral law; that's a temporary thing, right? Like that's the
yeah,
way that Thomas Aquinas had that categorized. But that's not how they thought about it in the Old Testament. And so, yeah, I mean, we can move forward with the Orthodoxy Index if you're good with that.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you land there?
Well, let's see. I don't know. I think I'll give it a 5 or maybe a 6, 5 or 6. It doesn't have anything particularly like, I guess besides well, I guess when you're trying to reject the Torah, that becomes problematic. And then also, you know, the anti-Semitic kind of view is probably problematic too. And there was one other thing I can't remember. Oh yeah, like when you're minimizing the significance of the thief on the cross being a criminal and someone who needs redemption, like when you're trying to make him seem like someone good, um, that also seems problematic. So all things considered, there's not really a lot going for it. I was going to say 5. I think I'll say a 4.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this a 3, just because this turns the gospel into a gospel of the already mostly righteous.
Hmm.
or not so sinful. This becomes a gospel of the not so sinful. It does have the point of like Jesus explicitly saying, I was begotten of the Father before all ages, which is like, oh, okay, that's great. But, it's also like really anti Semitic. It's also not biblical in like rejecting the Torah. Like that's like semi Marcionite. That's pretty problematic. I mean, being anti-Semitic is pretty like terrible and just like disgusting and wrong and not biblical. But then like also just like your whole principle of like, yeah, I mean, that could be interpreted different ways, I guess. But yeah, so I'm gonna give this a 3. It's just not that it's not there for me. So yeah.
Thing. Wow.
Yeah. So this is all of the apocryphal gospels. We've gone over the infancy gospels. We've gone over some miscellaneous gospels. We've gone over Agrapha and Lost Sayings of Jesus. That goes back. I like forgot about that. We've gone over like ministry and passion gospels, and now we've gone over Pontius Pilate's gospels. And I think next week we will just do like an overview and like a recap of all the apocryphal gospels, bringing up the best. And we're going to do a little bit of a make your own apocryphal gospel. So tune in next week. That's going to be exciting. After that, we're going to jump into the apocryphal Acts. Okay. So just like in the canonical New Testament, how there's gospels, Acts, that's where we're going next. So until then, make sure to Bible on.
Babylon.